Oftentimes, twins share everything. Whether it's clothes, toys, or personal traits like looks and personality quirks, twins share a lot. Sometimes, as we'll see in this video however, twin sharing may set in motion a terrible series of events that may affect and even end other people's lives. And speaking of sharing, if you enjoy sharing, or even just like to creep out your friends, why not send them a link to this video? Enjoy the story. In May of 2018, Swedish twin sisters Sabrina and Ursula Eriksson secretly left Sabrina's home in Ireland. They went to Liverpool, England, and immediately proceeded to the local police station to share concerns about Sabrina's child back home. Baffled as to why the women would travel to England to report this, the local police contacted Irish authorities to conduct a welfare check on the home and child. Upon finding out that the child was okay, they then boarded a bus headed for London. Several passengers would later report strange and disturbing behavior from the sisters, and the twins would even have the bus driver make an unscheduled stop, claiming they weren't feeling well. Concerned, the bus driver then refused to let them reboard the bus, and they would leave them at the service station they had stopped at. The manager of the service station also believed the sisters were acting strange and called the police. Police then arrived on the scene, and after questioning the twins, they had no real indicators that they were any real threat to anyone, so they couldn't do much but let them go on their way. Sabrina and Ursula, now stranded, decide to start walking along one of the busiest highways in England, the M6. That's when surveillance cameras would witness something truly bizarre. The women were seen walking down the central reservation, or median, when without any warning or indication darted out into traffic. They were both then struck by cars, and it brought the highway to a halt. Concerned motorists then called the highway patrol to report the accident. When the highway patrol would arrive on the scene, they would find that the twins only had superficial injuries, and they would walk the sisters to the shoulder of the highway to clear the road to allow traffic to restart and to further interview them. Without warning, while being questioned, Ursula again walked into traffic and was run over by a 40-ton box truck. It crushed both of her legs. Just as this was unfolding, Sabrina followed suit and jumped into oncoming traffic and again was struck by an oncoming car at high speed. After smashing into the windshield, she was thrown into the air and eventually landed on the roadway. A nearby film crew who was filming for the television show Real Stories of the Highway Patrol motorway cops had caught these series of bizarre events on camera. Ursula, who had suffered multiple compound fractures, then screamed for police to help her even though the people who were attempting to aid her were police. She then spit and hissed at them, claiming that they were not real police, that she knew who they were, and again that they weren't real. After regaining consciousness after several minutes of being knocked out, Sabrina then stood up and started fighting with the police who were around her. She struggled with police officers and eventually punched one of them in the face before again attempting to run out into traffic after jumping the divider. As she was doing this, she was screaming to her sister that the people trying to help them were trying to steal their organs. Police, who would later report that they were surprised by Sabrina's strength, would then have to wrestle her and eventually manage to restrain her. It would eventually take 6 people to actually subdue her, including police and concerned drivers. From there, they were taken to a hospital where the story continues to get even more strange. Ursula was rushed into emergency surgery while staff attended to and evaluated Sabrina. At this point, Sabrina was completely calm and even joking with the staff. The toxicology reports that they ran on Ursula would show no presence of drugs or alcohol. Sabrina was not tested. After several professionals evaluated Sabrina, they deemed that there were no signs of mental or psychological illness, and she was then released to the justice system, which would charge her and sentence her to 1 day in custody, which was considered to have been served while she was being evaluated at the hospital. What struck all of the professionals as extremely odd was that she didn't mention why she was in England, and she never once asked about her sister. They had no choice but to release Sabrina. Later, 2 friends, Glenn Hollingshead and Peter Malloy, were walking home from a pub with Glenn's dog when they saw Sabrina standing on the side of the road. She smiled and asked if she could pet Glenn's dog, and then asked if there were any local bed and breakfasts or hotels in the area. Glenn and Peter then told her that there were not. Sabrina told them that she was looking for her sister, and Glenn said that she could stay at his place while they would check local hospitals to see if they could locate her. The trio then went to Glenn's house. While there, she would frequently and suddenly stand up for no reason, rush to the windows, and carefully peek through the curtains for people who she said were following or watching her. She would offer them cigarettes only to snatch them away just as they were about to light them, and then shove them back into her pack. When they asked Sabrina why she would do that, she said that they were probably poisoned and that nobody should smoke them. Ironically, she would tell them this while smoking one of them. Peter would later say she would never once complain about pain or exhibit any signs that you might expect from someone who was recently struck by a car at high speeds. Having seen enough, Peter decided that the situation was just too weird for him and he opted to leave. This would be the last time that he saw Glenn alive. The next day, Glenn called around searching for Sabrina's sister and even recruited his brother into the search. Later that day, Glenn would ask his neighbor for some tea bags and then return inside, only to almost immediately come back outside, pouring blood from 4 stab wounds, screaming out to his neighbor, "She stabbed me," before collapsing. Glenn's neighbor would then see Sabrina fleeing Glenn's house with a hammer in her hand. Just down the street, a passing motorist who was unaware of what had just transpired saw Sabrina and pulled over to help her, but then noticed that she was repeatedly smashing herself in the head with the hammer. He tried to stop her, and Sabrina smashed a roofing tile over his head. By now, authorities were in sight and began to give chase. Sabrina fled to a bridge and then immediately jumped off from a height of 30 feet. The impact would shatter both of her ankles and fracture her skull. Sabrina would again be rushed to a hospital, but this time they would hold both her and Ursula for months. Ursula, who hadn't really committed any crime, was then eventually allowed to return home to her family in Sweden, whereas Sabrina was charged with her crimes. The trial was delayed multiple times, and eventually Sabrina would plea bargain down to lesser charges and plead guilty. She was assessed by 2 forensic psychologists, but she would only ever respond with no comment. After serving 2.5 of her 5-year sentence, she was released and allowed to return home to Sweden. While incarcerated, Sabrina would never give any clues or even speak about the events that had led to her imprisonment. And an in-depth investigation into the sisters would find nothing that would be useful in establishing a history of mental illness or psychosis. To this day, it is thought that Sabrina fell victim to her sister's original psychotic break and that the phenomenon folie à deux, or madness for two, is to blame for the bizarre series of events. Folie à deux is a rare but well-documented psychological phenomena. It is a contagious type of madness that manifests in shared delusions and psychosis affecting 2 or more individuals, usually members of close family. So as you can see, sometimes sharing is not all it's made out to be. Granted, we all do things psychologically based on other people's behavior, such as when someone around you yawning causes you to yawn, but luckily this does not usually extend to the type of behaviors outlined in this story. If you found this story interesting, please remember to like and subscribe, as it's instrumental in building the channel's viewership. Thank you for watching until the end, and I'll see you next time. Until then, stay weird, everybody.